Are you sure this is worth detouring for?
If this planet really is on Earth's level of habitability, it needs to be documented.
Captain Roderick, who made the final destinations to divert towards the unknown planet, watched as her ship drew closer to the most familiar blue and green orb. If they weren't several light years away, he'd swear it was Earth. Even initial scans showed readings close to matching the home of humanity. Oxygen levels were breathable, temperatures were livable, and there was surprisingly abundance of water present. How hasn't the planet been charted yet? The ship eased down through the atmosphere and landed with a bump on solid ground. Captain Roderick selected 4 crew members for an exploration team, ordering the rest to keep busy on the ship. First was Tiana, a veteran science officer with shoulder-length brown hair and a permanently quizzical gaze. Second came Glenn, the navigator who never missed a chance to check out a new place. Heading up the rear was a medical officer named Pedro and another longtime crew member called UV. They all stood together with their captain as the elevator lowered, dropping the 5 of them into the light of a brand new world. Captain Roderick immediately felt deja vu. They were staying on grass, pure green grass, that he thought it was only from the one place in the cold, dark universe, and that place was Earth. The rest of the crew was taken in the sight in a similar amazement. Solid blue sky stretched above them, marred only by a few wavy white clouds, while on the ground, thick trees stretched into the distance of a landscape gorgeous enough to be a postcard. Light streamed in from the distant star, casting all the colors of the Earth's sunset across the wilderness.
It's incredible,
Glenn exclaimed, taking in a deep breath. Tiana explained a square device in her hand.
Temperatures are holding at around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Atmospheric readings show oxygen levels at about 21%. Just like we saw on the ship. Perfect living conditions for humans.
Look, over there,
UV said, and the crew followed her finger to spot a lake close by. The 5 of them walked to the water's edge, and Captain Roderick crouched down to get a closer look. He found the liquid to be crystal clear, all the way down to the rock-filled bottom. UV bent down as well, and with some hesitation, scooped a bit into her hand and let it drip through her fingers. The water was all right.
It's clean, according to this.
Tiana said as she tapped on her tablet.
Cleaner than some places on Earth, actually.
Pedro grimaced.
Okay, but I don't have the meds to treat poisoning out here.
I'll try it first.
Captain Roderick announced. He scooped a handful of water into his palm and raised it to his lips. His eyes widened as the liquid entered his mouth, instantly feeling more refreshed. Scooping up more, he swallowed several palms of it as UV and Glenn joined in. The water was cool and perfect, reminding Roderick of the icy glass of lemonade in summer heat. Soon, Captain Roderick slipped into the water and started doing backstrokes, joyfully.
Pedro, come on in. I bet I'm a faster swimmer than you.
He laughed.
Thanks, I'll pass. But do let me know if you feel any parasites.
After they had their fill, they started scanning the landscape. It was UV who spotted a landmark through binoculars.
what's that tower in the distance?
She asked. The rest of them squinted. There, almost at the edge of the horizon, was a large cylinder shape, stretching up into the sky. None of them could see the end in the few wispy clouds surrounding it.
Guess we got a direction now.
Captain Roderick said.
Once we're ready, we'll head for that tower.
Glenn, Pedro, and UV returned to the elevator of the ship, where 5 backpacks of exploration supplies sat ready. Tiana pulled Captain Rodriguez aside before he can get his own. There was a grave look on her face, one that the captain never liked to see.
Something's bothering me,
She said, holding up her device so Roderick could take a look. The screen was a black grid, with red outlines appearing as it passed over the crew members, and a jumble of more as Tiana held it up to the ship. She then turned around and scanned in a circle around her. The screen remained black.
There are no life forms other than us within 1,000 miles. No big creatures, no small critters, not even any insects in the ground.
Tiana explained.
Is that a problem?
Roderick asked. Tiana's face remained serious.
These readings show the perfect conditions for life, so why is there no life here?
Roderick looked around at the Earth-like planet. No life anywhere? An eerie chill tickled his spine, as he considered if venturing further out would be a good idea.
You worry too much, Tina.
Said Glenn, who heard her comments as he and his 2 companions returned with the supplies.
If this place is empty, then we're the first to set foot on it. Maybe we'll get to name the planet and everything.
That's all well and good, but
Look, if there's nothing out there, then nothing can attack us. Let's get on with this.
Captain Roderick put a reassuring hand on Tiana's shoulder.
Exploring is our job after all.
Tiana sighed and picked up her own bag of supplies, keeping her persistent worries to herself. So the 5 of them set towards the distant structure, walking along a dirt path next to a lake. It twisted through a few patches of trees until the incline came, and the crew began to trek up a grassy hillside. They passed many beautiful sights, remnants of Earth. A pristine waterfall cascaded down onto a creek that ran towards the lake. Brilliantly colored wildflowers grew in large patches, untouched, but in perfect manicured rows without a single weed. Wild bushes with full, ripe crimson berries grouped in droves all around, and after a taste test, proved to just be as juicy and satisfying as they appeared. Not one piece of technology or modern amenities, and yet the natural landscape was enough to impress each of the crew members. Tiana kept her hand on the tablet, scanning and documenting everything. Pedro and UV helped her by bagging samples of dirt and plants for examining later. Glenn kept them heading north with his compass, the direction of the strange tower that was becoming closer as they walked along. Still, the top remained invisible, and Captain Roderick began to wonder if it stretched all the way into space. They know for sure that they would reach the structure's foundation. Finally, they reached the top of the incline and decided to take a break. Captain Roderick gazed back the way they came, seeing their distant ship become the size of an acorn. Behind on the horizon, the star mimicking the sun was starting to disappear, casting purple lights across the sky. They come a long way.
It's so quiet.
Glenn commented. He was sitting next to his pack and had pulled out a protein bar.
I could see this as another Earth colony. People would pay huge money to live in all this peace.
This type of quiet is what drives folks insane.
Pedro said. UV was eyeing their destination with her binoculars.
Structure is a weird shade of green. Honestly, it looks like that thing might be organic, like a big tree or something. At this point, I don't think we'll reach it before nightfall.
She glanced back at Captain Roderick, who scratched his chin in thought. Nightfall was unpredictable. He wondered just how dark it would get without any light sources. Then again, it was nothing that they had prepared for.
We've got lights with us. I see no reason not to continue.
He said.
Any signs of life yet, Tiana?
She spun slowly in a circle with the device, then shook her head. Unease still clung to her face.
Good.
Roderick said.
Then we'd best get moving.
They pressed on. Eventually the trees became sparse and changed into a large, empty field at the top of the hill that they climbed. By then, darkness had overtaken the planet, but above hung an almost unfiltered view of the stars. Shiny dots of all sizes covered the sky, except for the dark patch directly where the destination sat. They were close and would reach it within an hour. Then they finally found out what it really was. Once more, they walked, each crew member bringing out large flashlights to guide their way. There in the field of grass in the dark, the silence became an ever-present reminder of how far away the safety of the ship was. Captain Roderick had picked up the pace without realizing it, but none of his companions questioned why. As they drew closer, the tower ahead revealed itself to be larger and larger, until it was apparent the base covered miles of land. Their long journey ended feet from the structure. They were all weary and out of breath, but stood in awe of what lay before them. The width of the structure stretched far to both directions, so much so that squinting was the only way to see the curvature of both sides, forming an almost cylindrical shape, like a tree's trunk. Captain Roderick leaned his head back as far as he could. Still, he could not make out where the thing ended upwards. But the strange starless patch of sky hovered directly above. UV's theory proved correct. The structure was indeed organic, merging with the ground as if it had grown from soil. Glenn stepped slowly forward with an outstretched hand.
Wait!
Tiana said.
I don't think you should do that.
She's right, Glenn. You might disturb something in there.
Captain Roderick threw in.
I'm just going to feel it.
Glenn answered. His hand pressed against the green surface ever so lightly, and then he pressed a little harder.
It's cold,
he answered.
The texture feels like a hard shell fruit.
He stepped down from the towering green obelisk, holding his hand out to Pedro so he could make sure nothing was clinging onto his skin. Pedro found no evidence of irritation. UV, meanwhile, was staring up with her binoculars.
Pretty sure that dark patch wasn't this big an hour ago,
she murmured. Captain Roderick looked up once more. She was right. Directly above them, the light of the stars began to blur and vanish further, like a large mass of clouds was expanding over them from whatever the structure's top was. The rest of the stars beyond its border remained vivid, making the growing dark spots even more obvious.
Captain,
Tiana called.
I could be reading this wrong, but there are faint traces of life coming from this thing.
She held up her device. Sure enough, as she aimed at the structure, dots of red and orange flickered across the screen.
It's inconsistent, which might mean a glitch or a misread, but it's the first reading we've seen on the planet. What should we do?
Captain Roderick sighed. All coming to the structure has done was make more questions than answers. He almost wished that they never landed in the first place, but now that they had, it was his duty to document everything and bring it to his supervisors for study. An undiscovered planet able to support life was not something he can overlook. The captain's guidebook referred to those places as terrestrial domain.
All right. Here's what we're going to do.
Roderick began.
First, I'm going to contact the ship. Then we're going to set up lights and gather as much data as we can. Since I really don't want to stumble back towards the ship in the dark, We'll make camp for a few hours when we're done. We can head back when it starts to get light again.
We're going to sleep here?
Tiana questioned. She didn't like the thought of being unconscious on an unknown planet.
Just for a few hours. We'll take turns keeping watch. Sound good?
Glenn, Pedro, and UV nodded their heads. Tiana hesitated, but eventually nodded as well. There was a camp set up with 4 light sticks illuminating the small area. The work was quick and calculated, collecting more dirt samples and scanning around every inch of the green tower. None, however, had any luck in cutting a sample from the dense bark. They jotted notes. They tested data. The job was routine to them, and soon enough, the crew of 5 was crawling into sleeping bags as Captain Roderick dimmed the lights.
Just think.
Glenn was saying.
If they turn this planet into a new colony, our names are going to history books as the ones who discovered it. Hell, I might even consider settling down here. It's almost better than Earth.
The whole thing has to be charted first, or at least a good amount of it. Hopefully all these resources aren't exclusive to this area.
Pedro said.
Well, there's no question how perfect of a find it is, and how we're here first is beyond me. Can't believe we just happen to be passing by.
Doesn't it seem a little too perfect?
All 4 heads towards Tiana. She was laying her back in the sleeping bag, staring straight up into the sky.
What do you mean?
UV asked from the spot where she laid.
I mean, perfect oxygen levels, perfect temperature, perfect everything for life. Yet, it's nowhere on any charts, and there's nobody and nothing here. Hundreds of ships just like ours have passed through this sector of space every week, but somehow we found it, without even having to search. None of this makes any sense.
Glenn scoffed.
Get off of it, Tina. Everybody gets lucky once in a while. That's how every new planet was found.
Tiana said nothing. The green structure loomed over them, an unending tower that would watch over them as they slept. One by one, they all nodded off, until Tiana was the sole person awake. Taking the first shift of night watch, her eyes burned as she stared at a tablet. Over and over, she browsed on what they collected, trying to solve a problem that they might not exist. Time started to melt away. Captain Roderick knew something was wrong the second he opened his eyes. It was still dark, but something about the atmosphere had changed. A new heat was present, like the kind that came from standing next to an exhaust-filled highway. Feeling the heat of 100 working engines, he sat up. The sky had changed as well. The dark mass, which a few hours ago had only covered a small area above the structure, was blanketing a majority of the atmosphere in a huge shadow.
Captain!
Tiana said. He turned towards her. Tears were pouring down her face. Her hands lay quivering at her side. She put on a weak smile.
I think I figured it all out.
Roderick got to his feet, and his heart began to pound. She was scaring him.
What are you talking about?
Have you heard of an anglerfish?
Tiana asked, her voice void of emotion.
You don't seem well,
An anglerfish lives deep in Earth's oceans. It's an ugly-looking creature that lures its prey in, with a light attached to a fin on its forehead. Can you imagine being a fish swimming along in the dark when you see a beacon of light in the distance? It's so beautiful, so perfect, that an unconscious attraction makes you swim right to it. By the time you realize you've been baited into a trap, the anglerfish snaps you up in its jaws.
Science Officer Tiana, I think we need to get you back to the ship for a checkup.
She shook her head. With her right hand, she picked up the device and held it above her head.
Know where we go. We'll change the truth. See for yourself.
He looked and did see. On the screen, showing right above them, was a life form reading. A bigger one than Roderick has ever seen. the gargantuan red blob almost covering the entire screen. As realization clicked into his mind, he felt a subtle rumbling from beneath his feet. The tower that they walked so far to reach was moving. It stretched and tugged in the ground, like something was pulling it towards from the sky, pulling the whole planet towards something bigger. Roderick broke from his trance and whipped his body over to raise his sleeping crewmates, but Tiana grabbed his wrist.
Don't wake them. It's too late. It was too late the second we landed on this planet.
Captain Roderick watched as the shadow seemed to move closer to the ground, growing more and more solid as a towering green structure swayed. Shimmers began to form on the edge of the mass, in several layers that resembled the blotted out stars. Rows of sharp mountains used to devour food. Food the entire crew was about to become. The promise of a new colony for humanity faded as the perfect planet to support life, which had done its job as a lure, edged closer to the unfathomable thing it was attached to. The stars were blotted out by the planet-sized set of jaws hurling towards the surface. Roderick wondered if those last few moments, if the planet of doom would be just as beautiful for the next crew, who landing on it thinking they made the discovery of a lifetime. Then the jaws snapped shut, and everything went black.
Good night, farewell, and remember, don't get lost in the dark.